Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show here on Tuesday at 8 p.m. every single week, giving you your weekly rugby fix, talking about all the stuff that's going on around off the pitch. If you want to know, have reviews of the actual games, then we do that on Sundays at 8 p.m. with our rugby review show. So if you want to catch up on how all the action has gone at the weekends, that's the show for you, and you can catch that either on our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or also as a podcast. Just search for New Zealand Sports Radio on your favorite podcatcher, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of those wonderful places. But hey, you're here to listen to us talk about rugby. What we're going to talk about, we're going to have a quick chat about the under-20s competition that's been happening in Auckland. It's been set up by the clubs up there. We'll have a chat about some Mitre 10 Cup stuff. Super Rugby is back in, you think, Paul, but no, it's finished. No, it's not. It's back in South Africa. And we'll have a chat about that as well. So lots of stuff to talk about, and to join me to do all of that, I've got Boa. How are you doing, sir?
Very well, as usual. My highlight of the week, guys. Bit of a temporary setup today. I've just moved house and I'm staring at boxes and more boxes. So I do apologize. Bit of a temporary setup, but hey, great to be here. Wherever you are tuning in, I hope you had a great week.
And folks, this is going to be the last time that DrivingMaul will be coming to you from Hamilton. As of next week, I'll be in Waihi in my new house and new studio. So I look forward to that one. And yeah, it's going to take me a while to get set up properly. But hey, we will be up and running. Don't worry, we'll still be coming to you at 7 a.m. every single morning with the morning sports briefing and with all these evening shows as well, uninterrupted with all of the moves. But yes, this. Due to this COVID this year, one of the things that happened was that New Zealand Rugby basically cancelled all rep rugby beneath the Mitre 10 Cup and the Farah Palmer Cup. That meant Heartland Championship out the window. That meant all age grades out the window. And that also meant then a lot of players coming to the end of their club season, which was already shortened, with no rugby to play, or that's what it looked like. Now, we've seen the Heartland Championship sides organise themselves with some bilateral games, but not a full tournament. But the clubs up in Auckland, they decided the way forward was to play an under-20s competition. Obviously your club up there in Auckland, Boa, involved in that. This super club competition idea for under-20s, was it? I think it was for.
Under 21s, Paul. Super Club Rugby. And this was the initiative by the directors of rugby of the respective clubs. And depending on which part of Auckland, south, east, central, and west, there was an amalgamation of 4 clubs each. So, for example, Southside Rising, which was represented by Manukau Rowers, my club, Peptoi, East Tamaki, and Otahuhu. Very, very successful concept. Mr. Tony Lafetanoa out from Waitakere was the instigator of this. And, I think this needs to be rolled out. This template needs to be replicated right around the country. And that's what's going to happen next year. And as you rightly pointed out,
slow the horse down there, sir. Slow it down. You've rushed all the way into next year. Who knows what will happen with next year? Will we have zombie alien attacks? Who knows? Looking at this year, anything could happen. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's just remind people as to what actually it was. So you say those 4 teams, also including one team from across the bridge from the North Harbour Rugby Union as well. In that, I understand, as part of one of the teams. So sort of round robin, and then finals. But so as you say, organised out of Waitemata initially. Great to get people like Michael Jones on board, promoting it, and also essentially through him, I think, and through other contacts, getting it on Sky TV, which was. That was a major coup, wasn't it? Getting it broadcast that way.
Absolutely, and most of these players. Now, I had 4 of my premier players because this year we didn't have a under-21s team because of the whole COVID situation, and we couldn't field an under-21s team for Manukau Rowers. So this meant that most of these players who didn't get to complete the full season, they got another opportunity to play rugby in front of a live audience on Sky TV. Sky were, of course, the naming rights sponsor. It was a massive success, obviously played for the Sir Michael Jones Trophy. How cool is that? You're handing over a trophy on live TV, named after you. And of course, we had some real heavyweight support. Ernie Clark, chairman of Auckland Rugby, right behind this. And, I was really happy for the players, the parents, friends and family. It was a good turnout. Played at Waitemata. It was played in a good spirit. There were some real big hits, lots of flair, lots of entertainment. And, the whole idea of putting Super Club Rugby in front of a, franchised team name such as Southside Rising just gave these guys a bit of a mental edge. And they went out there and they played some fantastic rugby. So great initiative. Great innovation from the directors of rugby coming from within the clubs. And of course, as you said, hold your horse. Next year, I sincerely hope that this gets rolled out nationwide. All the other unions come on board. And maybe it would lead to a national competition where the respective winners of the unions or the amalgamated unions would then go into a knockout competition and eventually find out who the champion is.
Well, it's so before we get into next year, also, so one of the things that this has been able to do is it's allowed a lot of these players to showcase their abilities, and several players have already been contacted by provinces around the country looking at talent identification and opportunities to potentially bring some of those players down out of the Auckland province into other provinces. Look, we know that happens all the time. It's happened for years. You have a quarter of the population living in Greater Auckland, so hence they're not all going to stay here. But it's been a great showcase for those players and an opportunity for those great players to potentially find Mitre 10 Cup contracts in the future or other professional contracts, because they've been on that TV piece has been really big. And I guess this is part of the argument around whether we should or shouldn't televise first 15 rugby, because with it not happening this year, a whole bunch of kids, and you can say, oh, they're 18, they're young adults. No, they're kids. A whole bunch of kids have decided to said, look, I'm going to defer my year, I'm going to stay one more year at school to play first 15 because I want the exposure that I get from first 15 rugby that'll help my rugby career. And so I guess there's an argument there, isn't there, Bo, around whether we should be televising under 50, sort of first 15 rugby. We've seen what good it can do later on, but perhaps it maybe over professionalizes something that should be more development related.
There's two sides to the argument, the way I see it. I mean, there's a lot of pros for televising first 15 competition, and I think there's always a market for local homegrown talent. And this might be the opportunity to really open a gateway into a full-blown, homegrown televised season. And this just adds another layer of a very marketable product, especially for players at the Colts level. And this showcases talent, because you have to understand, Paul, there are a lot of players after playing first 15 rugby at school level, they don't actually pursue any sort of competitive rugby. And this really showed this year in particular. Obviously, we had COVID-19 with a number of clubs, and my club, Manukau Rowers, being probably the biggest catchment club for South Auckland talent. We didn't field an under-21 side, which was, for most people, is quite surprising. So what this under-21s tournament does, I think, is just springboard most of that talent at under-19 first 15 level, and it just gives them another pathway to continue and grow the wider talent pool. So from a provincial point of view, especially in Auckland, I think this is going to be a breakthrough or a marquee transition pathway, so that more and more younger players who would have otherwise stopped playing rugby after playing first 15, they get further opportunity to play. So I think it's a fantastic thing. I think there's a real good market for both first 15 and the under-21 Super Club Rugby to coexist and kind of go hand in hand.
I think the 221s one, I think should be televised. I'm skeptical still. I'm not clearly on either camp, but I am concerned that televising first 15 rugby over professionalize it, and when kids should be concentrating on developing themselves on a whole, because obviously, as you say, a lot of those players won't make it as professional players, so they need something else to fall back on for the ones that don't. And if you're going to, hence I think there needs to be a balancing act at the first 15 level. By the time we're talking about the under 19s, sorry, the under 20s, under 21s, that Super Rugby, that's a point where they've probably they do have careers. Otherwise, they'd be starving, and because they definitely don't earn it from club rugby, but also are looking to pursue that. I think at that level, it's definitely the right thing to do. Schoolboy, I'm not so sure about. Now, interesting there, you're suggesting that this could be sort of rolled out around the rest of the country, but I mean, there already is a under 21s sort of rep rugby that goes on that each of the provinces do. So why do you see this being stronger, being more useful than say representative rugby or at that age grade?
Because I think there are a lot of players who miss out, because if you just look at the rep team for a particular age bracket, you can only absorb a certain amount of players per squad. Whereas if you have this franchise-based system where you have clubs amalgamating, it gives more players who would have otherwise missed out the ability to show some late season form as well. Because my experience, I'm putting my coaching hat on here, the 4 boys who represented Manukau Rowers who were playing for Southside Rising, I think this 21's Super Club Rugby tournament, they showed their best form of the season. And that told me that these guys were actually late bloomers. And the more rugby they played, they've got more run-on form, and they put their best performances towards the latter part of the season. So that's something, from a coaching point of view, it's a learning I've taken on board as well. And I'm sure these boys representing my club aren't the only players who will have the same situation, because I looked right across the board. There were some, fantastic performances, lots of talent. And I think timing-wise, it's probably the best thing to do, because going forward next year, if the calendar goes according to plan and we don't have any further stoppages or lockdowns or zombie apocalypses, as you rightly said, it's going to coincide with the Mitre 10. So there's all that sort of commercial opportunity, and of course the ability for local provincial coaches to look at some of that talent on display and actually pull them into the Mitre 10 squad if the opportunity arises.
Yeah. Now, as you say, it gives four times the number of players the opportunity to actually play, rather than rep rugby doing just one. So one of the strengths of this competition has been that it's been televised, right? That's one of the big strengths of this competition. One of the problems of trying to roll this out across the country is, if we just talk about Super Rugby provinces, that's 14 provinces. If you have 4 teams per province, you're suddenly talking about, what is that, 52? Is that right? Anyway, over 50 teams, 50 games, over 50 teams, 25 plus games a weekend. They're not going to be able to televise all of them, are they? Where I say, and one of the strengths of this competition has been that it has been televised.
No, absolutely, and I think it's a case of picking the right, game of the week, game of the weekend, whatever you want to call it. Program it so that it coincides with the Mitre 10. Play it as a curtain raiser. So there's a whole raft of possibilities, and I saw Simon on the feed talking about the Bay of Plenty province, where 3 teams, or just say there's that possibility. So there'll be certain provinces where you have a high concentration of players, and of course that's relative to numbers of population. It's just a case of picking and choosing which conference or which province will have the most attractive game, coincided with one of the marquee games which can be televised. And again, it's innovation. It's something new. It's something fresh, and it's getting these kids eyeballs on talent and playing footy. So it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, a few comments in the chat about some schoolboys rugby and school sport, and it's been televised. I don't really want to head down that one too much. It was just a side comment, but yes, you're right. The government is starting to look into that, and they are looking into whether it should or shouldn't happen. One of the points that Simon says that the other games could be streamed on Sky Sports Next. The problem is, Simon, is that when you get up to 25 games a weekend, plus you add in those minor 10 cup games, which is another 7 games. You add in some international games. Suddenly, the number of cameramen you need is just crazy. So you can't actually stream all of those. The cost around streaming all of those and covering all of those becomes nuts. And if you do end up with now there are some very, very good local setups. Gecko Productions out of Bay of Plenty are fantastic, for example, but they're one crowd. They can do one game at a time. They can't do. I don't think they're big enough yet to do multiple games. But if you get away from that and get down to an amateur kind of level, the quality of the coverage just goes through the floor, and it becomes pretty much unwatchable. It is very, very poor. So so I think you're right. You're right though. You wouldn't be able to televise as many of them. It would be trying to pick and choose which ones. And I think at that point we end up with some of the problems we have with club rugby, which is that that it doesn't. There's too much to try and expose properly. You can't focus the marketing properly, which is what they've managed to do here with just 4 teams, 2 games a weekend. That they can do. Whereas if you try and suddenly blow that up to 50 odd teams, 20 odd games a weekend, I just don't think you can market it properly.
There's absolutely no market for that sort of numbers. And just coming back to schools for 15, look, the reality is the demand for there's a lot of demand for eyeballs on schools for 15 rugby, whether we like it or not. So obviously Sky TV, being a commercial operation, they will drive where the demand is. So if you compare under 21s, obviously it's initial incubation period, so to speak. This year was pretty much a trial, fantastic success. But you compare that against the Land Rover First 15, it's no comparison. And there is a huge demand for the schools. And I recall having a conversation about this because this was the brainchild of the late great Martin Crowe when he was involved with Sky, and the amount of subscriptions for the rugby channel, it was like $15 a month when Sky were running it. It just spiked and surged literally overnight, and the demand stays strong. So we'll just have to wait and see how this whole thing fans out come season 2021.
Yeah, we will do. And look, one of the reasons that it's not getting the eyeballs that First 15 do is because First 15 has got the history behind it, whereas this is a brand new product. People don't have the emotional connection with the clubs so much because they are brand new, and so it'll take that sort of stuff will take time to build up. So, but anyway, fantastic that it happened. I mean, trying to stand something up from nothing with no money to go from basically a concept, a bunch of clubs short on cash at the time, managing to put it together, get some sponsorship, get some very good coverage. So congratulations to the clubs in Auckland for making that happen. And it was the clubs. Sure, the union came on board and said yes, cool, we'll kind of sanction it as such, but this was really a club-driven event, not a union-driven event.
100%, and that needs to be said because this was an initiative, a bit of innovation from the clubs, the directors of rugby. Everyone banded together. We had a shoestring budget, quite literally, and it just happened just like that. So it just goes to show when everyone bands together, works towards a very common goal, things happen real quick.
And talking of shoestring budgets and what can happen with on very little, That's what happens here at New Zealand Sports Radio as well. So, folks, if you would like to support New Zealand Sports Radio, those of you watching on YouTube can do so through Super Chat if you'd like to. Otherwise, you can head over to patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio, and you can become a supporter of the channel for as little as $1 a month with that one. Simon mentions here has mentioned here about the Bermuda Tens. Have you heard about this, Boa? Have you paid me? Do you know anything about the Bermuda Tens that's been going on?
I have. I'm not a huge fan of tens, it must be said. I just don't like the format whatsoever. Especially the last tens. It was the Gold Coast. I think the Auckland Blues won it. It's look, this, from time to time we have all these private equity groups coming on board, but I seriously have my doubts as to whether this is going to be marketable or whether it's actually going to be a sellable product, especially amongst the purists, because tens is kind of a hybrid or in between your 15s, which is just season proper or the game proper, and the shorter version, which is a 7. So it's here nor neither there. And I have to say, I'm not a big fan. I'm not sold on it. But hey, all power to them, and hopefully this can take off. And hopefully it doesn't end up like those mystery planes and ships in the Bermuda Triangle on season God.
So for those of you that haven't heard about this, basically the idea is that this grows into a World Tens series of events in this year. Bermuda is the only stop on that series, and the idea is it grows. There's a number of teams in there. Ones that that sort of stand out for me are like the Ohio Aviators, which is the rebirth of a team from pro rugby a few years ago, which is interesting to see them rebirth. The Asia Tigers, a team based out of Singapore, normally took part in Global Rapid Rugby and is one of the teams that has submitted a proposal for a Super Rugby expansion within the New Zealand conference. So they're there at the Tens. It's become a home for a lot of the Sevens players because pretty much all of the European-based countries have basically cut their Sevens programs. So all the England players, for example, Sevens players, were made redundant and had no jobs and income. So it's become a home for a lot of the Sevens players. I think what a lot of the Sevens players are figuring out, though, is that there's not as much room on the pitch with Tens, and there are some big boys there that are going to squash you. So it's an interesting concept. They've also played around with the laws. I haven't looked at this in detail, but apparently you can have a 1, 2, 3, and 5 point conversion. Which again, I don't mind playing. I don't mind some of the innovations with laws like we saw in Global Rapid Rugby, where we're talking about things like quicker scrums, quicker lineouts, the 50-22 and the 22-50. Those sort of variations, I can kind of understand what you're trying to do. By adding what I think is more of a gimmicky thing around how far back the conversion is and yet more points, that one I can't get on board with, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Paul, look, it's never a good idea when you have a tournament called the Bermuda Tens and have a team called the Ohio Aviators. That's just wrong juxtaposition. That's just I just sort of put it out there.
So there are other teams. Those are the two teams that caught my eye. I think there's the London Royals. There's a whole bunch of other teams out there. I say now my problem, and one of the things for me is I can't see how Sevens beneath that World Tour can be professional, right? Whereas you look at if you look at the basically the model for team sports on the whole, and there's an exception with cycling, which I'll get into in a second. You play home games and away games, and you build a squad. You build a fan base out of a location where you play. With Sevens, you don't do that. So how are you going to build that fan base up? The other examples are things like Formula One, for example, but then people attach themselves to the car brands that are part of that. And that's where they get supporter base from. Now you don't really have a car brand as part of the Sevens, so I don't see how Sevens will build up team fan bases. Cycling, the fan bases quite often are not team related, but people generally follow a rider, and so they'll support a team for a while the rider's there. But when that rider moves, they'll generally move with the rider to another team. So, and I don't think we don't have those big enough personalities within Sevens to have a sustainable fan base to draw big enough crowds to tournaments. So I don't see how Sevens and therefore also this Tens touring concept, I don't see how that kind of works financially. For me, I say all team sports that I've seen work financially have a home ground or a home base where they build the support around, and I can't see that working here for the Tens. I don't see how it works here for the Tens. I don't see how it works for the Sevens either.
There's two of us both. It's for me. It's just rugby is not the fastest moving sport on earth, and especially from a fan base, as you rightly said, you need to have a home base. And I really can't see this. I'm not trying to sound negative because any form of rugby is great, but I just think there's just too much innovation in the form of, as you rightly said, gimmicky, and it's just going to confuse a lot of people. And all it's going to be is just some kind of sideline coach jester style entertainment. And but hey, all power to them, and hopefully they don't disappear in Bermuda.
Yeah, good luck to them. I mean, look, I've got fully behind the Major League Rugby, and I think Major League Rugby is a fantastic product. I think that's a great thing to expand and grow. So I'm not anti new leagues per se. I just don't get this one. And I say, we'll see where it goes. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear much of it ever again, to be honest. Tens is basically festival rugby at the end of the season that allows the props to go as well. That's what it is. It's for a bit of fun. It's not actually for viewing per se. I think it's not a spectator consumed sport. It's one that involves lots of drinking and a fun weekend for the players, more than anything else. Minor 10 Cup then, and in the title of this I put will Canterbury get relegated? Oh wow, Canterbury, bottom of the Premiership. This is a team that since 2008 has only not made the final twice. One of those was last year when Tasman beat Wellington. The other one was back in 2014 when Taranaki beat Tasman. Wow, and Canterbury last in the Premiership. I mean, this is unheard of, isn't it?
Very much so. And prior to commencement of the NPC my 10, you asked me who you got running for the title. I had three teams. Auckland were top of the table. Anyway, Canterbury and Tasman. Well, who would have thought? But I have to say, Paul, Canterbury have looked a little bit jaded this season. They haven't been as clinical as they usually are. They haven't really finished things off. They played what I call 99% rugby. They do the really nice things right until when it matters, and they turn the ball over. And I think that has helped them at very, very crucial junctures. But certainly, sitting at the bottom end of the Premiership by their high standards and their fans' expectations, simply and utterly unacceptable. So, interesting times.
It is interesting times. I mean, one of the things we've said about this Canterbury side over the past few weeks, and Nocturnal Rights puts in there that he said they've been playing too conservatively, is if you just look at the names in that squad, you don't have the Matt Todds. We don't have the those sort of players in there that are fringe, that are great Super Rugby players, potentially even fringe All Blacks. Because Matt Todd never really kind of made it. I mean, he obviously got a few caps, but was really a Super Rugby player. And you look at the Canterbury squad now. You look at it and go, "Ooh, I don't recognise most of those names." Once the All Blacks are gone. A question I think was put in the live chat a couple of weeks ago, or during one of our chats, we didn't get to discussing it, was historically the Crusaders have had an academy with Canterbury, and that's been it. Over the last couple of years, I'm not sure exactly when it was set up, but it's only about 2 or 3 years now, I think. Is that the Tasman also now has a Crusaders Academy. Now, having those two having that second academy, has that drained talent away from Canterbury, where previously people would go to Canterbury because that was the route into the Crusaders. Now you can get in there from two ways, either Canterbury or Tasman. So has that reduced amount of talent that's been available, or that Canterbury be catching?
Yeah, look, that could very well be a factor. I think what really needs to happen, and this will happen, is that they will have a very critical review after or post-mortem and actually understand where the gaps are. You could be very well right, Paul, talent being split. But again, I think from a tactical point of view, they will have to address what their game plans and strategies are. And of course, this is one of my personal beliefs. I think right across all teams in the modern game, there's not enough emphasis on goal kicking. There's enough opportunities with penalties, but teams are a little bit shy on not wanting to take the 3 points. And I think, especially at provincial or NPC, what we call Mitre 10, there's plenty of opportunity for teams to take shots at goal, and possibly, if you're lacking in certain parts of your game, if you don't have the names, as you rightly pointed out, these are some of the gaps teams can fill. And if you have gun goal kickers, you can stay competitive, stay afloat with the top of the table simply by converting the point. So, Canterbury, if you're listening, have a look. Look at your goal kickers. Perhaps you need to go back to setting up a goal kicking academy and look to take the easy points.
Well, All Black Brett Cameron has not been has been starting on the bench, hasn't he? He's not been actually starting on the pitch, which has been a bit of a surprise. Clearly, his star has kind of dropped considerably from being picked, as I say, for that Japan game pre-Rugby World Cup.
Yep. And look, I just want to quickly answer what Nocturnal said on the live chat about conventional tactics. That's very true. And one thing you have to understand, Nocturnal, is if you look at most of the defensive patterns and defensive structures most of the other provinces are doing, they use this rush or the blitz defense really, really well. So the whole idea is to give the attacking players as little or least time to be able to execute their skills. And this is possibly one of the areas where Canterbury has really struggled this year. They haven't adapted to it, and they're playing a fairly predictable pattern, and they're falling victim to some of these really staunch, fast-moving defenses. So, yeah, perhaps they should play with a little bit more flair. They might need to have a look at the selection policy. They might need to pull some players from a pretty much a SOS mode, get some experienced players in just to make sure that they pull themselves out of this little rut they're in. But yeah, overall, I think there's two key reasons here. One, poor goal kicking, and number two, they just don't have the same amount of experience and those big name players who can change games just like that. Yeah,
and when you say about SOSing players in, look, their last two games are against Auckland and Tasman. I mean, they've got the hardest run-in possible to finish the season. So yes, I think I mentioned ahead of the Otago game that I could see Canterbury not winning another game this season. Now I expected them to beat Otago, but I said if they slipped up there, that could be it. That could be they might not win again. And yeah, with Auckland and Tasman coming up, yeah, it's definitely.
Was it Waikato? They had a bit of a sledge against Canterbury on their Twitter feed. They said Canterbury, better luck next time. You've got Auckland and Tasman next. Yeah, they can play a bit of rugby. It was, Is
that Waikato? Wow. Well, I might have to chat with Josh about that one. Sorry, Joel, not Josh. Joel about that one. Who's the guy who manages that account. One of the things that Aaron says is, look, as far as he's concerned, what goes around comes around. And look, teams are cyclic, aren't they? Look, it's you can't stay at the top forever, or that's what we've seen. To have done so since 2008 is obviously amazingly good. And if Canterbury gets relegated, is anyone going to care except for those of the land of the damned? I'm going to care because I think it'd be absolutely fantastic and fun. So I think a lot of Aucklanders will care if Canterbury get relegated, but in the way of being happy about it rather than being sad about it. So I think lots of people will care if Canterbury do get relegated. Look, when you've been top dog for that long, seeing you brought down, there's going to be a lot of glee around that. And we've got to look. Canterbury have been top dog for a long time and deserved by how they've played. Let's be honest, they have been a fantastic team. You can't take that away from them. It looks like their time is up. Come in boats 10. Your time is up, kind of thing. Talking about coming in comes Mr. Stephen Harris, only half an hour late. How you doing, sir? You see, not only is he late, but he then goes and doesn't turn his mute off either. So not only is he late, but he also gets his tech wrong. Gee, Mr. Harris.
I know, shocking. But I am here.
You are, with your Northland hat on, which I'm not surprised you're wearing after their result this weekend.
Oh, you still got to remain loyal, no matter what.
Kia ora to you, Mr. Harris. Better late than never. It's always nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, just on the back end of your conversation, I was listening about Canterbury. Listen, yeah, they'll go down, but gee, they'll bounce. As a Northern supporter, that's all we need. Canterbury down in the Championship division. Need that like we need a hole in the head. They'll bounce straight back up. Although, as said the other night, it took Wellington a couple of seasons to bounce back up. But I think Canterbury's got enough talent to bounce right back. It doesn't matter. Teams will come and go. But hey, let's not quite write them off just yet.
Guys, one thing I have to say is, pre-season preparation is vital, and I can vouch for this, especially Auckland and their current success. It has been built on some incredible pre-season planning, because I spent a lot of time with Alama, Pilo, and also with Craig McGrath coming into the fold. They did some enormous amount of pre-season planning, and everything which they planned pre-season, they have now put into practice, and they're reaping the rewards. So again, I guess as Ashwin rightly said, what goes around comes around. It's cyclic. They'll probably go inspect some of their systems and processes, especially what some of their coaching staff are doing. And they'll get it right. They'll get it right very quickly. They have a very good system, and they've got some very good coaching coordinators and coaching educators down in Canterbury. They'll be back. They'll be back with a vengeance.
Yeah. I was about to say, one of the other real key things that I've learned over the last few days, I did a bit of digging about sort of these PUF contracts that they give to players to keep them in the academy. And I know Auckland have a very, very good budget. I believe it's over $100,000 that Dan Bowden has got to basically play with. So, listen, he's basically out and about, and he's ensuring that players. Just to give you an example, if you think back to last year's Auckland under-19 team, which played in the final of the Jock Hobbs tournament, I already know of several players in that team that have actually been signed for PUF contracts, and they have been ranked for, say, for example, they put in a ranking situation. There's take for example John Latu, who was the number 8 in that team, happens to be a Northern boy. I'm not bitter or anything, but he's sort of ranked about number 6, but they see him maybe as an Auckland number 8 in the year, not 2021, but 2022, 23. So they've actually got a progressive step program for these kids to go into, and it's all basically mapped out. And the unions that do this rather well will be the unions that will progress. It's really important that you actually have some money in that kitty for PUFs, just to ensure that those kids are locked into the province for during that time. And I know with my own union, Northern is probably one of the issues that they do struggle with. They farm a lot of kids around the country, but just retaining them, real hard work.
So what does PUF stand for?
PUF, I'm not entirely sure, but it's sort of like a contract for younger guys. I think it's some sort of development contract for guys to keep them remained in the academy. Now, some of these contracts can be between 2 and 7K from what I've gleaned. Also, it actually keeps them in a province for an elongated period of time that their career path is actually mapped out. So they're given up during that time. They're given a lot of polish, a lot of love, and they're always basically. So, for example, if you're Auckland, they're always in touch with these players, just letting them know how they're progressing, the skill sets that they need to improve on, and of course, the better they play, the more they impress. They go up the pecking order, so to speak. The problem that they do have sometimes, you'll have another union who's looking for a player of reasonable quality. Like if you example your Counties Manukau, your 2 number 8s get injured, all of a sudden you're looking around for another number 8, so you might end up picking the 3rd or 4th ranked number 8 out of Auckland. It's actually quite an interesting process, but I suspect that the unions that do that rather well, or have got some money in the kitty to have these players locked up, you've actually got that a whole forward planning going.
Yeah, there's another thing also. If you get a kid who spends 2 or 3 years in a place, he's going to build up a network there. He's going to have a circle of friends, and it's going to be you're making it. He's more likely to stay, even if he doesn't make it into the Mitre 10 Cup side. He might become. He'll have himself a job. He might stick around playing club rugby for a while. It's going to be good for the level of your club competition, which means you're going to have better players coming through overall at a better level, etc., etc. It all adds up. It's not just about the sort of the cash that's there and every single player making it as well. Talking of if your number 8 gets injured, if your 2 number 8s in a Kiriwani and Hoskins Tutu gets whisked away by the All Blacks, what do you do as an Auckland rugby coach? Do you head down and have a look at the under-20s and under-21s and pick a number 8, or do you head off to Manawatu and pick up a Tuipulotu and get him on loan to play for you at the weekend?
All right, you want to take that one?
Well, this has been something I've been going on for a good 15 months now. So I'll give you a bit of an insight. Early part of last year, I wrote up a framework for Auckland Rugby. This is more to do with high performance coaches, but basically it was a case of trying to spread rep players amongst the clubs, and depending on a particular skill or skills or a skill set which a particular player needed to work on so that they could contribute better in a Mitre 10 or an NPC campaign, there is a good collaboration between the high performance coaches of the province and the respective club coaches. So it was kind of like, you're subcontracting out, for a better choice of words, the coaching of a certain skill or skill set to the club coaches. And there is good communication between the clubs and the high performance coaches. Thereby, if at any point a contracted rep player is injured and there is a vacancy in a particular position for someone to step up, there are players on demand. Now, I think, as Paul said, getting players on demand, this is a really good example of why having such a system and process is absolutely paramount. Because number one, players within the province who are playing club rugby, who are busting their gut, turning up week in, week out, they don't miss out on opportunities. And I guess there's always a question, are these guys good enough to go and play Mitre 10 rugby? There's always that question, but we have to have some kind of system and process in place which gives preference to our local homegrown players so that they are ready, they're amped, they're prepped. When the opportunity arises, they're ready to go. Does that answer the question, Paul?
It is kind of staggering that for all Auckland's talents, and you've got guys in a certain pecking order, and I would imagine your next number 8, so your your development number 8s. And there was some good one. I think I saw a really good number 8 running around for college rifles this year. I'm actually really surprised Auckland have gone away to Manawatu to have picked up a player that Manawatu didn't want. But it's not the first time. We discussed that on Sunday night. I think in the 2018 team that won the Mitre Team Cup, I think there were 4 players. There were 4 players that were loan players from outside Auckland. Kurt Heatherly, Mike Sonesi, there was Taniola Koroi, and there was somebody else as well, Robbie Abel, who'd basically been loaned off the Rebels, or one of those sides from Australia at that time. I still see Nocturnal Rights mentioned Freedom Vahakolo before, who was the Ponsonby fullback winger this year. Yeah, Freedom's actually a Whangarei boys, originally out of Whangarei boys High. So yeah, that's another one that's got away from us as well. So once again, I think that real important piece in rugby is the guys who run the high performance role. I think it's up to them to have a really, really good eye for talent and what that picture looks like, and not just as it looks like at the moment, but maybe 2 or 3 years down the track, whether they can picture that kid playing rep rugby.
Yeah, Auckland had ample down stocks.
Yeah, that we'll have our own conversation, Paul, because Paul's muted.
Yes, I know. I was like, one of the look, I picked a situation there that was deliberately going to cause a bit of question marks as to why is Auckland having to borrow players. Look, they have lost 2 players who they perhaps wouldn't have expect Hoskins to quite his star to rise quite so rapidly. I don't think. Didn't even play Super Rugby last year, Super Rugby this year, and suddenly he's in the All Blacks. So I kind of I get that they would have they wouldn't have expected to need another 8 this season. But look, all the clubs do, all the provinces do it to a greater or lesser degree. They have plenty put a lot of work in, so they don't have to do it as much anymore. They used to have like 2 or 3 loan players, and it is a look. Certain times, certain provinces are going to be have more or less of a particular position, and therefore players will get loaned out. Aaron asks, is Tuipulotu from Auckland originally? I don't think he is, and he's not in any way a relationship to Patrick at all. So the Tuipulotu we're talking about, who was number 8.
I was about to say they've also lost Waimana Riedlinger Kappa to injury as well. So if you think about it, they were probably down to their 4th ranked number 8. Hence they've gone out. Yeah.
So as I say, I was being a bit cheeky with that one. But the clubs, you obviously want every province to build up and use their club system as much as possible for players. But sometimes these things happen. Now, Boa, something you mentioned pre-show was how well Super Rugby is going in South Africa.
Indeed. Well, lots of end-to-end action, and this whole excuse about not being prepared is just big chicken wing excuse. It's I have to say, because I've been watching some of the highlights. I watched the Stormers play the Bulls, Western Province versus Northern Transvaal, basically. It was a Currie Cup version, and I have to say there was some very entertaining, open, free-flowing rugby. And it's just a shame that the Springboks aren't there, because I would have loved to have seen the Boks replicate some of that rugby and play the All Blacks. But instead, they're playing dodgeball. Such a shame.
Now, to add a bit of balance to the show, here look, the Lions versus the Cheetahs was cancelled 2 weekends ago because of the number of COVID cases that the Lions picked up in their camp. Now they got a week later, they were able to play and beat the Griquas 61-31. So look, and that is round 4. So they have if they had flown out, they would have flown out with sort of 1 or just that That's funky super rugby, and then the green versus gold game would have been all the games they'd had before they flew out for the rugby championship. So it is. I say it is round 4 that's just completed. They really haven't had much rugby. Would I have liked to have seen them? Would I have liked to have seen them at the rugby championship? Absolutely. I think it's a crying shame they're not there. But I do get that they would have had very little preparation time for then. But then again, the Pumas will have had very little preparation time, and they will be there. So it's a swings and roundabouts thing. It's great to see that the Super Rugby is actually happening in South Africa. They've got it going. They've lost 1 game so far out of 4 rounds. That's not that bad going when you consider, I think, the situation in some countries and some places at the moment. So at least it is going on over there. But yes, there is that. But it's a crying shame they're not at the rugby championship.
Yeah, it's very exciting because dry, fast, firm pitch conditions, and all the teams are willing to throw the ball around, and that's what rugby fans want to see.
Yep, and then international rugby we have going on. Coming up in 2 weekends' time, we'll have Samoa. In the women's side, we'll have Samoa versus Tonga, as well as New Zealand women playing New Zealand Barbarians. This weekend they're doing the. I think it is this weekend that Probables versus Possibles game is this weekend. Also coming up. Also, congratulations to England who won the Six Nations about 8 months later than it was supposed to finish. But there we go. And Uruguay lost to Spain at 20-32. I didn't see that one coming. I thought Uruguay would go better against Spain than that. Fiji will play this Friday against Portugal before warming up before the Autumn Nations Cup that's going to be kicking off. So lots of international rugby going on, not only at the Rugby Championship, but also over in Europe as well. Yes, Simon. I just mentioned the Uruguay versus Spain thing there. Now, Stephen, you were at the. We spent the first 20 minutes or so half hour talking about the under 21s, but when you weren't there, you were at the finals. You did a couple of post match interviews for us that are on the New Zealand Sports Radio Facebook page. I think you're wanting to any questions that you wanted to ask Bella? I thought you mentioned something that specific things you had in mind.
Yeah, I had a couple of interesting conversations with Jeffrey Yeromi, who was the head coach of the Central team, and also I've just forgotten the guy's second name, Frenheim, who was the coach of the West Rangers, one of the coaches of the West Rangers team, and they were really positive about the tournament. It's filled a gap this year. I guess we'll have to just see how it plays out next year, how COVID and what the actual season looks like, because we could be back to normal next year, and might be a case of where do you fit it in, because usually at this, what we call this time of the year is usually rep season, when you see all these rep teams running around. So it's a case of who's gonna be available. But being there live, I was really impressed with the standard and the physicality and the size of some of these kids as well, and you can just see the kids that were standing out as well. I think player of the tournament Benjamin Stretton, I think it was named by Sir Michael Jones, a kid out of College Rifles. Quite interesting that he was selected, because if you look at all these athletes that were running around, you had these big Polynesian athletes, but your player of the tournament is a very tall, skinny Pākehā boy, which is great to see. But boy, the two locks. Josh Forbes, I think, an Australian boy. Those two kids were really, really outstanding. And from what I believe, throughout the whole tournament, there just wasn't any scuffle as well. So players all basically kept their head, and they were really disciplined. Obviously, there was an odd yellow card here and there for infractions, but listen, it was played in very, very good spirits.
Very good spirit. Yeah, look, fantastic. And, first of all, congratulations to Central Kings. Outstanding tournament, played some very tactical rugby. And, also for the coaches, what a fantastic opportunity. Initially, when this tournament was put together, I have to say, it's very difficult to find people to commit time to coach. But soon as Sky came on board, it was on television, man, we had coaches lining up left, right, and center, which I thought was great. Because you have to understand, most of these guys are volunteers. They're giving up their time, so extended time, doing overtime past the regular season of the Gallagher Premier Shield for the Auckland competition. And some great rugby, some big physical hits. The crowd really got behind the teams. And of course, some really nice set piece plays, as well as some counter-attacking rugby. And it just gave these boys who didn't get a full chance to complete the season for 2020 another crack at playing some rugby. And, for the boys who were involved with Southside Rising, each and every one, before every game, they pretty much spoke to me one-on-one. And, they were really buzzing. And, they were always trying to improve and put on a great show, because they knew family, friends, extended family were watching live on Sky TV. What a wonderful, beautiful thing.
I can't say where this came from, but talking about conflict with rep rugby, you might find that some players prefer to play in this tournament than make themselves available for rep rugby if it is still on TV.
That is the key, and that goes the same for coaches. You wouldn't believe how many players in other grades as well as premiers came up to me during and after season and said, "Oh, coach, next year if this is on, I want to be playing 21." So great signs.
Oh, that sounds good. Could be a gig in it for us next year. Now, that just on before I mentioned that those academy contracts, they're called PUDCs, and they're player union development contracts. Yeah, PUDs, not PUFs, and that's something that unions basically use to help develop that player, keep them in the game. They cost between 2 and 7, but I would imagine most of that cost goes into their training, keeping them in shape, etc. Just basically showing that the union is showing them a lot of love. I would imagine they still have to go back to their job 9 to 5 or 8 to 4.
Well, I was going to say, if you can live on 7K a year, you're doing well.
You do.
No, well,
okay.
That's my petrol cost.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to get around all these grounds. Just going to go back to the European international rugby that's going on. Yes, 3 members of the Fiji squad have tested positive for COVID, unfortunately, and 3 more are in isolation. So, look, it is great that they've managed to get some games happening and complete the Six Nations. They haven't managed to finish the Women's Six Nations because of COVID, so they're still having to try and get those fit those games in. We will see how the Autumn Nations Cup goes, how many of those games do manage to actually happen, and how many get cancelled. Look, France is going into has just gone into a 5-week lockdown. England has gone into a 4-week lockdown recently because of increasing numbers of COVID cases. Now, the lockdowns are not lockdowns in the same sense as we would know them in New Zealand, because things like schools are still open, for example, and people can still go to jobs if they cannot work from home. So, look, it's not lockdown in that kind of sense, but there definitely are reduction in the kind of events that can happen. So we'll see how many of the games actually get to go ahead. I mean, last weekend we saw the Wales-Scotland game happen at Park Scarlets rather than at the Millennium Stadium, because the Millennium Stadium is still set up as a hospital. So so look, there are or if not set up as hospital, then sort of has to be available to be used as a hospital. So we'll have to see how those games go ahead, but we will try and keep you up to date with how those progress here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Any other topics, boys, before we sign off?
Just before you go, just back to that final last week. Now, the player of the tournament was Benjamin Sterrett, and his locking partner and captain was Joe Fabish. And those 2 boys, Joe's he's an Australian boy, I believe, but plays more loose forward than he does lock. So 2 players to watch, but a couple of players for everybody to look out in the future was the halfback for the West Rangers, Miracle Naititi, who's just absolutely electric off the mark, and of course his first five partner, Junior Matotia, as well. Very, very good player, very slick first five, runs great angles and kicks goals as well. And the coach for the West, one of the coaches I spoke to for New Zealand Sport Radio was Jared Franheim, who had some really insightful thoughts as well. But no, that's it from me. It was short for me tonight. Oh, bugger.
Well, I'm scared about this one, Nocturnal Rights, because if I set Bella off on this one, we could be here for another half hour. Cards.
Oh, don't get me started. That last card, Shannon Frizzell. Oh my God, what is going on? You know, Ben O'Keefe, I have to say, he's a professional optometrist. Surely, the DMO said that the ball carrier fell onto the tackler's forearm, and he still gave a yellow card in the 81st minute. I mean, how ridiculous is this going to get? And I have to say, Wallabies, this going high tackle technique really needs to be inspected. I'm really surprised Harry Wilson didn't get cited for that shoulder to the head. There's outright thuggery on Sam Cane, and that ended Sam Cane's night. And also Daigunu, that aerial challenge, he was never ever anywhere close to the ball. According to the rule book, and this is what World Rugby has been going on and on and on about, player safety, blah, blah, blah. It's only a yellow card, dead set red, what I would call a Ferrari red. And again, Ben O'Keefe, what are you thinking? Pull the card out. That's what red cards are there for.
Yeah,
that was it. Yeah, if you touch someone in the air and they land in the head neck area, it's a red card, and that's exactly what happened. Red card, simple.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't get any redder. That was ridiculous. Oh, Frizzell, rough one, absolutely. I'm going to go off again, Noctello. That was just ridiculous. You know, Frizzell, that was a perfect two-man, what I call an airbag tackle. Absolutely smashed the Wallaby player. I think it was Jordan Pater. You know, I think he was missing a couple of teeth as well. And what happens? Out comes the yellow card. It's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like the insurance salesman giving out, you know, business cards saying, "Hey, have one." Just ridiculous.
Oh well, Paul, you got to give you your dues, mate. You actually said the Aussies would get smashed in one of these tests, and that's exactly what happened. And I probably, dare I say it, I can't see them being any more competitive in this next game. Even more so if Matt Tumua is not available for that test, because that first five out to not so much Jordan Patai. Jordan Patai looked good, but a couple of them looked out of their depth.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mismatch, and you know, I actually felt sorry. I took pity on those Aussies because they were just lambs to the slaughter. But here's the scary part: the All Blacks, for their part, they were very inaccurate as well. You know, they made about 17 handling errors. So the reality is, if they improve their handling and, you know, finishing and execution, maybe another 4 or 5%, you know, we would have seen 75 points, and that would have probably ended Debrini's career, because I don't think Australia were prepared for that type of hiding. But this weekend, All Blacks play in Brisbane. Historically, it's been a venue they haven't done very well, and looks like there'll be some wholesale changes. Most of the uncapped players and lightly tested All Blacks will be making it into the game day 23. So I think it'll be an interesting game. But again, you know, I can't see Australia improving a heck of a lot. Maybe the hiding won't be 40 points. Maybe it'll be 30. Who knows? So we'll wait and see.
Here's my notes from the game. You can see a whole bunch of things. Up to about half an hour mark, we got scores. Then it kind of, the All Blacks didn't score. Half time, first thing, and it's like, yeah, fall asleep. The second half was just, yeah, what was the point? It was all over. So I have no idea what this Frizzell thing is, because I'd gone to bed by then and missed that one entirely. To me, it wasn't a great game to watch.
The Frizzell thing is what I would call the blind trying to guide the blind. Does that make sense? It was that ridiculous. I mean, good God, what is rugby coming into? This is another way how you're trying to complicate simplicity. What should have been just a solid challenge was very unfortunate. There is no version, ladies and gentlemen, at Test rugby where people aren't going to get hurt, where people aren't going to get knocked out, lose few teeth, get some claret. That's going to happen. But what we don't want to do is dilute this game so much that every single innocuous knock, so even if you sneeze the wrong way, the All Blacks, it's quite ironic that in the 80th minute, the team which gets pinged and for a yellow card are the All Blacks. Just insane.
Anyway, so there you go, Nocturnal. You're right. So you asked for comment on the cards. We've given it to you. Playing Hodge at 10, I don't think was going to be the answer. Look, they have look. The thing about the Aussies, they've got a decent first 15, but when they lose a couple of players to injury, they just don't have the depth at the moment of experience, and that's what it is. And they lost James O'Connor, lost Matt Tamua, had 10 players with 5 or less caps, and they just panicked in that first half. Basically, is what happened.
And guys, the TMO, the try which was disallowed for having no control, I thought that was a try for money when Dane goes, pushed on the ball. I mean, everyone knew that except the TMO. Again, we're back at square one. Professional grade referees and TMOs trying to complicate what should be a very simple, straightforward decision.
It was Dane Coles doing out on the wing though, and also another player who did the same sort of thing, Ash Dixon. What's Ash Dixon doing? Chipping and chasing players. Look, if hookers are going to do that, they deserve the try to be disallowed. Definitely, that's not what hookers do. Get back in your place, hookers.
I was going to say Paul because he can.
Well, speaking of hookers, I think Amoa might get a start this weekend against Wallaby. So very exciting, and who knows, he might come with some stupendous plays. And I have to say, for me, the highlight of that game was that simple movement with Hoskins Sotutu picking the ball up at the base, going into that gap at pace, putting the ball a good 2 feet in front of where Rico Ioane on the right wing, on the edge, hits the ball at pace, dots it down. Simply sublime. And that, to me, highlighted the gulf where the Wallabies were and where the All Blacks are.
And great scoring technique with the one-handed dive as well. So,
well, what can I say? That said, nothing beats the highlight of Ben O'Keefe, the optometrist, handing out a yellow card in the 81st minute. It's just, what can I say? I'm not going to forget that one.
Sorry, looking forward to this coming weekend. Obviously, we have that game, and Saturday night at 9:45 is the Wallabies versus the All Blacks. As far as the Mitre 10 Cup goes, looking at that, so we have Southland versus Otago on Friday night. Then on Saturday, Auckland versus Northland, and North Harbour versus Counties Manukau. I'll be at one of those games. I'm not sure which one yet. And Tasman versus Canterbury. So look out for post-match interviews from those first two games. Hawke's Bay then have Ranfurly Shield challenge against Wellington, their final one of the season. So that's going to be a tough old one. I will be back in Hamilton for Waikato versus Bay of Plenty. Bring you post-match interviews from that, and then we finish up with Manawatu versus Taranaki at the weekend. So I'll be at least two. Stephen, are you gonna be at any games this weekend?
Well, I'm just trying to work out who's got the better food. After seeing your food in the press box at Eden Park last weekend, you're going to the North Harbour Counties game, son.
Okay, so you'll do Auckland versus Northland. I'll do North Harbour versus Counties.
Yeah.
There we go. Enjoy the food. I won't. So as Aaron says, Auckland versus North Auckland is the game that Stephen will be at. But thank you very much for joining us yet again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us halfway through, part-timer. We'll see you all tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Don't forget that the Standoff show has moved from Wednesday night to Thursday night because tomorrow night is State of Origin. So Brad will bring you all the news from State of Origin on Thursday evening at 8 p.m. for the Standoff show.